Have you ever really stopped to think about how much of the world around you you're just not seeing? I don't mean with your eyes, but with your mind. It's kind of wild, right? We all walk through the same physical world, but the reality each of us actually experiences is totally uniquely our own. Okay, let's get into this.
You know how this goes. You get it in your head that you want a specific car. Let's say it's a red convertible. And then all of a sudden, boom, you see them everywhere. On the highway, in every parking lot, even in commercials. It feels like the universe is trying to tell you something, doesn't it?
Well, sorry to burst that bubble, but it's not magic, and it's definitely not a coincidence. What you're actually experiencing is your brain's own powerful, built-in filter, and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's showing you what it thinks is important to you. So yeah, you have this personal gatekeeper inside your head. It uses a mix of your brain's wiring and some clever psychological shortcuts to basically curate your entire reality. So let's take a closer look at how this thing actually works.
Okay, so the main player here is something called the Reticular Activating System, or just the RAS. The best way to think of it is like a bouncer for your conscious mind. It's standing at the door, and there are millions of bits of information trying to get in every single second. The RAS decides which tiny fraction of all that actually gets a VIP pass into your awareness. So, when you decided you wanted that red car, you basically told your internal bouncer, hey, this is important now, and it started letting all the red cars through the velvet rope.
And this system is running 24/7. I mean, you can be in a super loud, crowded room, but the second someone says your name from across the way, you hear it clear as day. That's your RAS in action. At the very same time, until I mention it right now, you probably weren't aware of the feeling of your shoes on your feet, or the low hum of the AC in the background, or even the fact that your own nose is literally always in your field of vision. Your brain just filters all that useless stuff out so you can, function without being completely overwhelmed.
But here's the thing. This filtering isn't just about sensory stuff like sights and sounds. It's also psychological. Take something called the false consensus effect. This is basically our brain's tendency to just assume that our own opinions and habits are the normal ones, that most other people think and act the same way we do. It's a mental shortcut that filters our social reality, and it makes us feel like our personal perspective is pretty much universal truth.
So we've got this incredibly powerful biological and psychological filter that's been shaping our personal world for, well, forever. But in the 21st century, we've gone and built an entirely new layer right on top of it.
Yep, we've effectively outsourced our brain's filtering job to algorithms. So welcome to the age of the digital filter, where technology is busy creating a personalized little echo chamber just for you.
And the scale of this whole operation is what's truly mind-boggling, and it's mostly happening behind the scenes. Every single click, every search, every like, it's all being tracked. I mean, check out this quote. Just visiting the top websites out there installs, on average, dozens of trackers on your device, all designed to learn about you so they can tailor what you see from that moment on.
Eli Pariser, he's the guy who actually coined the term filter bubble. He breaks it down into this really simple three-step process. First, they figure out who you are. Then they start showing you more of what they think you want to see, and finally, they just keep refining that feedback loop until your online world is a perfectly tuned mirror of your own identity. It's just like the RAS in your brain, but supercharged with a ton of data.
So all of this raises a pretty fascinating question, doesn't it? If our brains and our technology are constantly filtering reality for us, what exactly are they filtering out? What might the world actually look like if we could peek beyond that filter?
The writer Aldous Huxley had this really powerful metaphor for it. He described the brain not as something that creates consciousness, but as a reducing valve. Its main job, he thought, was to protect us from this overwhelming, maybe infinite reality, which he called mind at large, by only letting in the tiny little trickle of information we need to survive day to day.
And it seems like sometimes that valve can loosen a bit. People report getting these little glimpses of an unfiltered reality in all sorts of ways. Sure, it can be through psychedelic experiences, which is what Huxley famously wrote about, but it also just happens to people spontaneously. For instance, there's a rare migraine aura called Alice in Wonderland syndrome, where people report the world suddenly feeling bizarre and distorted. Other people describe these moments of intense clarity during deep meditation, where it feels like the usual filter just drops away for a minute. You know, this desire to peek behind the curtain, to see beyond our own personal filter, it isn't new at all. In fact, you could make a pretty good argument that it's one of the oldest human quests there is. It shows up in philosophy, psychology, and spiritual traditions all over the globe.
And you can see this quest in some very different traditions. In Jungian psychology, the whole goal of individuation is a process of looking inward, past your surface-level personality, to try and discover your true self. And in a totally different vein, in the ancient Indian philosophy of Advaita Vedanta, the goal is to see past what they call Maya, the veil of illusion, to understand the true unified nature of reality. They're both just different paths to try and see beyond the default filter of our ego.
This quote from the 8th century philosopher Shankara really just gets right to the heart of it all. He's basically saying that our definition of what's real and what's possible is completely tied to what we're capable of perceiving. So, if our perception is limited by a filter, well then, our definition of reality is limited too.
So what this all comes down to is that from the ancient wiring of your brain to the modern algorithms on your phone, your reality is being actively shaped constantly. You're not just a passive observer in all this. Your attention, your beliefs, your choices, those are the instructions that are programming your filter every single day. Which leaves us with one last, pretty important question. What are you telling your filter to show you?